our goal was to get 5,000 subscribers. And as we had reached these various milestones, I'd been promising some master classes, and I did do a number, but then I left Calgary without completing the obligations, so to speak, which I'm very, very happy to do. So this has been months catching up, and I do apologize for the delay, but I hope it will all be worth it. So thank you again for supporting the chessbrah channel. And recently we reached other milestones, which were really cool too, like 100,000 subscriber followers on Twitch and 100,000 on YouTube. So that's really, really cool. And it's great to be a part of the chessbrah and to help them reach their goal. So again, thank you all for your support. I got a window set up here in the chat window, so I'm going to be engaged as much as I can and to take your questions and answer them. And I was thinking about masterclass today's, and I was thinking like with the Calgary, I was looking to teach a concept, whatever the concept might be, developing an
Hmm.
attacker's nose, recognizing a plan, how to formulate a plan, how to choose an opening. And for today's topic, I really wanted to go back in time to what for me was kind of like the most golden period in my chess career. It was when I started. And I started in 1972, the Bobby Fischer Boris Spassky match. And I remember going into the last exit, which was a coffee shop, and analyzing the games, just analyzing the games. There was a group of us and lots of hands on the board as all of the ideas were being tossed about and what Bobby would do or what Boris Spassky would do. And it was a really joyful time to begin with, but always this searching for the truth, sharing of ideas. And I wanted to kind of reflect that joy that I felt by doing a master class in that same spirit of collaboration. You're going to be the audience and my teacher, as well as I'm going to be your audience and your teacher. And uh, recently, in January, actually, here in Holland, we had the Tata Steel Chess Festival. It's a really, really cool event, and there's the top group, the master group, if you will, and then there's the challengers group, and there's tons of sections of amateurs, the opens, and it's all kind of a pyramid where, if you do really well, you go up to the next group next year, or you're relegated, and so on. And it's an opportunity for literally thousands of amateurs that come from all over Holland and, for that matter, Europe, to watch the event, participate at the event. And this year, like every year, a festival, it was really, really fun. And there were some really cool games that, well, we're going to look at right now today. And you're going to ask me questions and show me what I missed and
Just
talk
trying to be
about.
a fly on the wall.
Yeah, exactly, Amon. Be a fly on the wall, but also participate. Get in there, throw some patties. The first game that I've got, uh, and we're doing this through chess.com, by the way, so we're using their interface, and it's really, really cool. I get to do all kinds of highlighted. We have already loaded the games, and the
Yep.
first game that we're going to look at is the game between Jordan Van Forest, who was one of two Dutchmen in the event. The other is not Anish Giri. And Anish Giri, one of the highest rated players in the world, was the Dutch hope would perform really well. As it turned out, in the end, Jordan actually finished higher than Anish Giri,
And did you
making,
know, Yasser, that
yeah,
Jordan actually won his tournament here in Prague? So he played in the challengers group, and he
I
he
do.
actually came first place there. So another super strong performance. He's been gaining a ton of FIDE.
Exactly, another little feather in his cap. And I believe that Jordan goes to a St. Louis University or Webster. in St.
Uh,
Louis?
as far as I know, neither at the moment, unless he's just like
Ah,
like his friend Robbie Kevlishvili. He's at SLU. As far as I know, he's not yet. But if I had to
and,
guess, it'd be SLU.
and Benjamin Bach?
He is also at SLU. Yep.
Right. So
But
I saw Jordan like hanging around in St.
yeah,
Louis.
well, he played a tournament in St. Louis. I don't think he's enrolled there.
Gotcha. I
But
think
he's
that's
good
what it
buddies
is.
with them for sure.
Right. Benjamin Bach. I saw him palling, and I just made that association that he's going to school in St. Louis. But anyway, okay. So here's the setup. The sweet setup is that um, Magnus Carlsen was on a 110 game non-losing streak. Okay, by uh, at this exact moment, he had just tied Sergei Tivyaskov's non-losing streak of 110 games. If Magnus could score, or put another way, if Magnus avoided defeat in this particular game, he would then have a new world's record
Yep.
of undefeated games of 111. So this was a very big moment, and it wasn't lost on the Dutch crowd as they were all pulling and cheering for Jordan to pull off an upset and not only defeat the world champion Magnus Carlsen, but also stop him in his quest for yet another extraordinary accolade in his extraordinary career. So that's the setup, and we're going to get started. Now, e4, let's just do that. Let me click on the move. And very quickly, well, the Italian, bishop c4. It's become extremely popular at the elite levels, and just like everybody is playing the Italian opening again. I mean, I played it when I was in scholastics chess, but I had I thought that more or less when I became an expert master player, everybody started migrating towards bishop d5 and the Spanish. Today, bishop c4 is equally as popular. Now, very, very rarely do grandmasters play knight f6, as did Magnus. Like today, bishop c5 has become the absolutely most standard move. I would even go as far as to say as 90% of
Yep.
the time bishop c5 is being played. So already knight f6 is a little bit off the beaten path. Now, if Magnus hoped to, I don't know, catch his young opponent a little bit off by offering the move knight g5, he didn't succeed because Jordan didn't back down. Jordan said, "Bang!" The drawback, if there's such a thing as a drawback to the move knight f6, is it does allow knight g5, and Jordan jumped on the opportunity. And then again, it's very rare to see Magnus in this exact position, and I just don't know how much experience he has. But in any case, the play all went very, very quickly to this very well-known theoretical position. And today, bishop d3 is the choice of today's modern masters. Again, I don't want to get into too much about the opening because that's all theoretical in the books, and it's fashion and style. But if you were to go back to the Romantic period of the 18th and 19th centuries, bishop e2 was by far the most standard move. Bishop d3 has a different idea altogether. The idea is as bad as it looks, any kick by the move like h7, h6 is going to be met by knight e4.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, of course, is the bishop simply steps in the way of the d pawn, and white is not going to be playing the move d2, d4 anytime soon. Not when the bishop's sitting directly in front of it. You're not playing d4, the bishop on c1 is not getting developed either. Okay, so knight d5, fair enough. Nice discovered attack against the knight. And this time, since the knight would actually be misplaced on the e4 square, uh, again, I don't really want to get into theoretical grounds, but after a move like knight e4, well, let me just play the move. Knight e4, knight f4. You can see the bishop is going to be coming back, and this knight is going to probably get kicked around as well, like either with a future f5 or bishop f5.
Not very inspiring development there, Yasser. All the
No,
pieces on the
not at
back
all.
rank.
Yeah, not at all. Almost looks like a Fisher random kind of game, doesn't it? Okay, knight f3. Again, all very well known stuff up to this moment. And by the way, Anand, I've got a book here that I've been reading. I don't know, the Anand Files. It's a very interesting book.
Ah, that's why you called me Anand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like it's staring me at in the face, and it's a book about the 2008 2012 World Championship matches, and very interesting insights going on there. But I wanted to ask you, I've actually, how do you say, annotated these games, right? Now we're going to be, I'm moving through them pretty quickly, but I'm wondering if the audience wants, like for example, I just have the theory, a theoretical game between Levon Aronian. Um, how could the audience see the annotated game annotations?
You mean this game?
Yeah,
Like this game that you have here is,
yeah,
I guess, no, this one's Van Forest. This one is Aronians. Must be.
right, right. Do I
So
have to?
Aronian against Amin Bassem.
Right. So do I have to scroll through all the games, all of the moves for the audience to see?
I mean, I don't think so. I think sometimes it's sufficient to just maybe reference the game. Like if
Okay.
anyone wants to look it up, maybe you could mention the names of the players and maybe
Right.
like what year it was played or something, and
Sure.
the
So
enthusiasts can look it up.
right, exactly. So a couple of games by Levon Aronian, and you mentioned between Levon Aronian and Min from Moscow, Russia, 2019, but also a very important game, Levon Aronian versus Vidit
Right,
from Calcutta in India, also in 2019.
right.
And then Jordan Van Forest as well has played this uh, position, and in a previous encounter, his opponent had played knight f4. In this particular game, Magnus Carlsen played the move castles. And so, I mean, for Magnus, the world champion, he's definitely looking up Jordan's games, and he can see that Jordan has played this position before. And in,
Yep.
um, Magnus's opinion, he's got compensation for his pawn deficit. The problem from Black's perspective isn't so much the pawn deficit. Material is very important, of course, but it's just this is knight on a5. In many lines of this two knights defense, the knight on a5 is really a spectator for a long time, and it takes a number of tempi for the knight to get back in the game. So you're giving up a pawn, you're putting your knight a little bit on the outside, if you will, all in return, banking that you're going to get some nice attack with f5 and e4 going
Hmm.
as sufficient compensation. All right, well, let's see if Magnus is right. So he just played castles, rook e1. Classes here. Hold on. Oops, that's not right. I want to do it another way. Bishop d6. Uh, sorry. Knight c3. Castles.
Yep.
bishop e2. Now we're back up to date. Okay, so from White's point of view, so now we're kind of setting the table like what Black's problems were with his knight on a5, his pawn deficit. From White's point of view, it's clear he's got development problems. Specifically, this bishop on c1 is being hampered by the bishop on d3. Now, the bishop on d3 is also a nice tactical target for Black's pieces. This knight can hit the square f4, attacking the pawn on g2, attacking the bishop on d3. The pawn may go to f5, and then there's an e4 break. So White starts with the move bishop e2 to address both questions, both issues. First, he wants to complete his development, d2, d3, get the bits out, and second of all, he's sidestepping some of Black's action with f5 and e4. Let me check our chat. How's our chat doing, Aman?
Well, they're doing great, yeah. So we got some resubs, and also have to mention we have over 1,600 viewers here. So a lot of hype and a lot of people here checking out the stream. Shout out to chess.com as well for sort of embedding the show and getting the traffic over here where they need to be. I saw chess.com was in the Twitch chat earlier as well. Psyched for a masterclass. So I think we're doing well here, Yasser.
Well, very good, very good. Keep that up. And again, to each and every one of you, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to chess.com for hosting and making it all so very, very righteous for us.
And Yasser, what they say, because sometimes in the chat it might not look like it's busy, but the best thing to hear at a dinner table as the chef is silence. Everyone's enjoying their food. That's us, Yasser. We're not chatting as much because we're just fixated. We got our notepads out, we're listening, and we're waiting for what's next.
As a chef, I do agree that silence at the dinner table, boy, because it's chow time. That's usually a good sign. People are like whining and complaining. Food's not so good. So anyway, let's continue. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bishop e2, knight f4. Very normal move now. If Black doesn't play the move knight f4, if he plays like a move like f5 to try to get in e4, well, White's kind of happy because he's kind of preempts him. White gets to play the move d2, d3, which really takes a lot of the sting in the position away from Black. e4 is not coming, like hot and heavy. Also, the move knight f4 is now really off because of the trade. Finally, if you play f5, you've also got to be aware that White could play d4, e4, and knight e5. And again, this knight on a5, it just doesn't feel like there's sufficient compensation, and that was why Magnus chose knight f4.
And Yasser, the I guess one of the most important questions, which I think most people have, but I'll reiterate also because it's been specifically asked in the chat, which was, what is the advantage, or why even bother with playing bishop d3 if you're just going to play bishop d2 or bishop e2 rather? Why the stopping on d3 on the way? Why not bishop e2 straight away, save the move?
Well, exactly. So that hesitation has caused Black to waste some time himself. Black's knight was on f6, and it just went like from knight f6 to d5 to f4. So you could say that White's bishop d3, e2 lost a tempo, but he suckered Black into moving his knight multiple times, and as a result, White can catch up on defense, catch up in development, I wanted to say. So if we go back to the initial position and we go like, say, bishop e2, h6, knight here, this is how they used to play back in the day, right? You would have some really long-winded variations of the two knights that went like this. I remember reading as a kid Svetozar Gligorich's opening column in Chess Life, where the variations were really, really very, very, very lengthy and in-depth variations. And then Bobby Fischer reintroduced, you can read in Bobby Fischer's My 60 Memorable Games, his game with Arthur Bisguier. He reintroduced this move, Knight H3, an old line from Wilhelm Steinitz, the very first world champion, where Bobby ended up getting double pawns on the king side and went on to win a great game over Arthur Bisguier. And there's this great, The Art of Bisguier, a book by Arthur Bisguier about his autobiography, the chess games. He was explaining that the night before this game that he played with Bobby Fischer, My 60 Memorable Games, they had played Blitz all night, right? And Bobby had been, hustling, all of the chess players for money in 5 minutes game. And during the game, Bobby fell asleep.
I've done that before.
Just fell asleep. So there was Bisguier looking at Bobby's clock ticking down, and Bobby's out cold. So, Arthur shakes his head sadly, and, he makes the worst blunder in the position. He wakes Bobby up and says, Bobby, you with us? And Bobby, what? Bobby looks around, makes a move, slaps the clock, and proceeds to play a brilliancy, and the game appears in My 60 Memorable Games. Like,
it all becomes clear, Yasser, when you take a short nap.
So, in choosing these moves in the opening, Bishop D3 versus Bishop E2, what you have to do is first you have to know the book, know the theory, and then carefully weigh why Bishop D3 is justified over Bishop E2, this stutter step, so to speak. And is that the position that you want to achieve? So the whole study of the chess openings is kind of an art, a science, but it's also quite a fashion. Some opening moves, I don't even know why, at certain times are really, really fashionable. It seems like everybody and his brother wants to play the Benko Gambit one day. And then the next day, nobody's playing the Benko anymore. You're like,
I know.
What happened? What happened? What happened? I mean, did the Benko suddenly, who refuted the Benko Gambit? And they go, no, nothing's wrong with the Benko Gambit. You go, well, why aren't they playing it anymore? And I'm just saying that today, Bishop D3 has superseded Bishop E2 by a pretty large margin. I can't really say why. And maybe in another 10 years, Bishop E2 will become, the new standard or old standard. And I remember when I was working with Viktor Korchnoi during his World Championship campaign, he would often say to me, check the oracle. I was like, what? Check the oracle. So we'd be looking at an opening, and the oracle was the Encyclopedia of Chess Openings, the ECO.
Yeah, sir. So, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just gotta give a shout out. We got a huge raid. 900 people just came over from. It's now actually called the Botez Live channel, because she started to incorporate not only her sister but some of the other female streamers on her channel. So Alexandra Botez was commentating just now on a match that was organized between Lile Karidze and Chiyu Zhou, and they just finished that match and tossed over 900 people. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, and welcome everyone to what is an educational segment here, a rarity on the chessbrah channel. But Yasser is fulfilling his promise from long ago to do some master classes. So we're hanging out, doing some masterclass stuff and listening to Yasser's stories. But yeah, thanks for the 900 viewer raid.
Right. Well, educational. chessbrah, educational.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, all you raiders, welcome, welcome. Thank you, Alexandra, for sending the audience over. I hope we can be as entertaining as that match that you all just witnessed. So we're picking up the action here between Jordan Van Forest and Magnus Carlsen from the recent Tata Steel 2020 tournament. And this was a really important game. It was played in round 4, and Magnus had just tied the record for the most consecutive number of games without a loss. He had gone 110 games, tying Sergei Tivyakov's record, noting that Sergei Tivyakov achieved his record by playing a lot of Swiss Opens, whereas Magnus's record was really playing in the Grand Chess Tour and playing the most elite players on the planet. So a little bit like the records are incomparable. But having said that, nonetheless, it is what it is. And this game, Jordan Van Forest, was the 111th game. If Jordan could win, he would deny Magnus yet another wonderful accolade in an extraordinary career of Magnus. And we're just picking up the action here. And we're just talking about the difference between the move Bishop E2, which was the most popular move in the 18th and 19th centuries and 20th century, and the move Bishop D3, which has become the most popular move in this position of the two knights, and the vagaries of fashion, how moves become popular and fashionable. And today, Bishop D3 is the choice of the elite players. Okay. Yep. And then it was mentioning that Viktor Korchnoi would say to me when we were training and preparing him for his World Championship match and campaign in 1980 and 1981, he would say, go and consult the Oracle. And the Oracle were these encyclopedia of chess opening books. And I would go look through this incredible ECO code of the chess informator, find the variation, find the footnotes, and invariably I would find either David Bronstein or Viktor Korchnoi
right.
in the note. And I said, Victor, you said this is the right move. And he would go, yeah, it looked familiar. It was like he forgot more about chess than he remembered. It was amazing. Okay, so Bishop D3. Sorry for the interlude. Knight to D5 with a tempo against the knight. And with the bishop on D3, the knight oftentimes comes to E4. But now the knight actually redirects itself and goes knight F3 to attack the pawn on E5 right away. Another very, very important move for those of you who are theoretically gifted and you're trying to get at
not me.
Yeah, right. Jump in there, Amana. I need a witness. Is the move H2, H4? This is actually a very intriguing move. The idea is you're not really afraid of bishop E7 takes G5. Like you can almost have that pawn that helps me a lot. The idea is really like if you could provoke the opponent to play H7, H6, right? Does your knight want to go back right away? You could sometimes play Queen H5. You can even consider the sacrifice knight takes F7 types of ideas. So it's an intriguing move. I will just say that. Jordan, who has played this position before, played knight F3, bishop D6, knight C3, castles, bishop E2. And we had basically caught up to where we got rated.
Yeah, I think it was around here, bishop e2. I think it was f5 d3, and we were looking at that line about
Right,
what that was like, maybe what the engine would have preferred, or what, maybe another course of action for
right.
Magnus to take, but it wasn't ultimately what he went for in the game.
Yeah, this was the engine's recommendation, was this line with queen h4. And the idea is that you're pressing the action as fast as you possibly can. You're pawn down, and you really want to force matters. And as I was explaining from the very top of the program, one of the problems with the two knights and the fact that you're pawn down more has to do with this knight on a5. I mean, when you look at that knight on a5, you kind of think to yourself, my goodness, almost any other square on the board would be so much more ideal. Any centralized square, e7, e5, f6, you would really start to think that that black has some really good compensation. With the knight on a5, it takes some time for it to get into the game.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, Magnus made the very human choice of knight f4, which, well, obviously it does attack the bishop on e2 as well as the pawn on g2, a fork. And the idea is that as soon as white plays d3, the knight never really wants to go to f4. So if you're going to play knight f4, you got to do it kind of right away. And
Yep.
that was Magnus did.
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me too. Castles, bishop g4. Again, black is hurrying to get his pieces out. He's a pawn down, and he needs that compensation of being able to develop an initiative. d3. Knight takes e2. Again, if Magnus dilly-dallies, if you will, and plays a move like c5, which makes perfect sense. You want to bring this knight back into civilization. Well, the problem is once this knight gets eliminated, bishop takes, pawn takes, you've got weak pawns and just not enough threats.
Yep.
So knight e2, queen e2, f5. And on the surface, this looks like kind of an annoying compensation, right? This pin is really awkward, and black gets in. Well, first of all, e5, e4 ideas, because this rook could suddenly make a pretty gruesome appearance down the f file. There's also, again, this idea of getting this knight back into play with c5 and knight c6. Any questions from the audience, Amon?
I've been looking. I think a few people were asking the rather obvious question. Hey, isn't this a game that just happened? Yes, it was from last month, basically, at Tata Steel. So this is a brand new game. Because people are used to your stories, yes, or they're used to the games
Right.
from 1960, 70, but this is actually a brand new cutting edge game from Yasser, so it's a treat.
Exactly. I miss my Bogdanics, and I was raised on a diet of Michael Toll and Tigran Petrosian and Bobby Fischer. So, I miss those guys. So it's nice to, go down the street there and engage in a game with Firouzja. By the way, the guy Firouzja is really tall. Have you met him in person, by the way? For a
Uh,
16-year
yeah.
old,
So
I mean,
he
he's
was
over
in
6
Prague.
foot.
He was in the Czech Republic, right? So he
Oh,
won
cool.
that tournament there.
Yeah.
And so we definitely met Firouzja. I think Eric had met him maybe for the first time at World Blitz.
Okay.
And then I met him for the first time in person, at least in the tournament in Czech Republic. So definitely very tall kid. I mean, he's like 16 years old, and he's definitely taller than me.
Well, I mean, didn't you look down at your shoes and check that you weren't standing in a hole or something? It's like, what happened? This guy's like amazing. Okay, so H3. So again, on the surface, you kind of think, okay, H3, this is annoying. White's gonna the black's gonna keep this pin, and white at some point is going to have to play kind of an ungainly move like queen e3 to get out of the pin. So Magnus maintains the pin with bishop h5, likely anticipating a move like queen e3, and black may just simply play queen f6 and complete his development. And again, this knight on a5 is one day going to come back into play. But this is where Jordan really, I mean, the playing hall, at first it kind of just went silent, like as Jordan moves, stunned the playing hall. But then immediately everybody just sort of like started shouting and like, holy cow, look at that, look at that.
G4. Very visual move.
Yeah, exactly. Old guys like me, this is kind of like lifting the kimono, I mean, you're exposing yourself after a move like G4. You don't get to take that move back. But what the move does after the pretty forced capture FG4, knight G5, is it wins white the command of the E4 square. Ooh. We can immediately start to see that the benefits are really clear if if white manages to simply recapture his pawn and then cement a knight on e4. There's going to be no attack against white's king. Mm-hmm. And at this moment, the feeling in the playing hall is, our man Jordan, he's taking it to the champ. And it was a really an excitement.
There was some Dutch pride.
Yeah, there was a real buzz going on. The other thing that's happening in the position is after the move queen d7, again, kind of like what else, you want to defend the pawn on g4. White plays the move knight e4, and he's very quick to play the move knight g3, chasing away the bishop so that you can capture the pawn on g4. So, as it's going, it's really going in white's favor, and it's almost right out of the opening. And after this move, bishop e7, knight g3, bishop g6, queen takes g4, you can say to yourself, black is now really in trouble. Yeah. I mean, like there's no ifs, ands, or buts, because if black, who had sacrificed a pawn, was counting on an attack, an initiative, with queens coming off the board, there's no attack, right? This knight on a5, the world champion's problems are really mounting. Queen takes g4, not the move that Magnus really wanted to play. He just really can't avoid the queen trade in any, I would say, reasonable manner, because the problem is, where is the queen really going to go? That it doesn't, for example, walk into a fork, or a queen might land on the e6 square as well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so queen trade takes c5. Okay, here we could see, a real grimacing Magnus Carlsen. They got these really nice webcams, at the Tata Steel playing hall, and you can see the players. And Magnus was really exactly at this moment, like totally focused and very, very aware that things are not going well. Now, having said that, this move is a really great move for a host of reasons, not the least of which is this forlorn knight is about ready to return to action. Knight e4. So all of these moves look very, I want to say, natural.
Yep.
So eliminating this knight, f3, and rook c6. So you could say that, okay, it's the two Bs, right? The two bishops versus the two knights, but white's got an extra pawn. But it's actually not just the two bishops. Really, when you have the knights, one of the key principles that you need is to have a knight that has a centralized protected square, okay, an outpost in the center. And that knight on e4 is just as good as that bishop on g6, right? And in fact, in certain cases, as soon as white gets in playing f4, f5, followed by g5, followed by f6, that knight on e4 could be a monster.
Yep.
So, okay, b3, bishop a3. And now we're coming to the great moment of the game, where I think that Jordan has an advantage. He's played really, really excellently right up to this point, and he didn't really spend that much time in executing what looks to be a pretty natural move. Rook on c1 to e1. The rook sidesteps the attack. It supports the knight, as mentioned. f4, f5 is on white's agenda. I think that you could kind of make this move very quickly, right? But if Jordan had just given it a little bit more thought, and he says, okay, I'm a pawn up, and if he had sacrificed an exchange, just a moment, with d takes c4, white's compensation is incredibly good. Bishop takes, rook takes. Okay, so it's two pawns, but look a little bit deeper. I've got this massive majority on the queen side, no question about that. But also this pawn on d4 is actually pretty weak. So let's just continue a line. Looks like a natural move, right?
Yep.
Rook d1, rook d3. So I'd like to play the move c3, but it is met by d3. And this was a line that I listed as also favorable for white. We can do that again. I thought rook d3 is the best move, but just to show an example of how white's pawns could really become a big factor. If white picks up this pawn on d3, by the way, that's pawn number 3 for the exchange.
Yeah, this looks pretty good.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it just have that really nice feel?
Well, knight coming to d4 certainly feels good.
like white's doing really well, but check this one out too. Rook d3. Oops, excuse me. Rook d3. King f7. All of these moves look really natural. And again, white is ready to make the grand entrance with his king, right?
Isn't it quite nice, the line, like a couple moves back? So you played rook d3, and the whole point is to play c3. So after king f7, it's like, well, why don't you go c3?
Right, just a second. Why didn't I go c3? I know I had it all set up. Because there's, and I think Jordan might have seen this trick.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably why Jordan also, in case Jordan had seen this trick, played as in the game, rook on c1 to e1, because you got this
Yep. Very nice, eh?
very nice capture. And shockingly, after the desirable rook takes d8, oops, you know, like, oh boy, I overdid things a little bit. The pawn
And if the guy
got
goes pawn takes on e4 instead of knight takes, so that he has knight e2 in
yeah.
that line, then I guess probably you go like rook d6 or something, and on knight f5, then you could take on c3, or
Let's see. So you're saying that in
not
this
quite, eh?
line,
Because
so
this still looks really good for white. That's why I was like, trying to
right,
figure out
no, what was I thinking? Let me see.
because rook d6, knight f5, pawn takes c3. Unfortunately, I can take that one if I wanted, and that's
right.
too
This looks
much.
like it should win, right? I mean, rook check. This is like whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, these two pawns with active pieces looks like it should win. Wait a minute. Maybe this was also um, a line. You can, takes. So, and we go rook d6, right? Knight f5. Wow. First impressions, uh, Aman, is that this is actually very good for white as well.
Yeah, yeah. Struggling to find a bad line for Jordan.
I know. I mean, but it all stems from this crucial moment and the willingness to sacrifice in
Yeah.
exchange.
Do you think it had to do with his mental state playing the world champion, Yasser? Because I think it's fair to say that DC4 as a grandmaster is a move you think about. Of course, you think about it. You see it.
No,
It's just a
yeah,
confidence thing, maybe.
no question. I'm sure that you think about it. You see that. Yeah, this is good for me, but you also want to talk yourself out of giving up the exchange because you've got that mindset that hey,
I
I'm a
shouldn't
pawn
have to
out.
do this.
Right. I'm facing the world champion. I don't want to give him anything, right? And the other thing is that when you look at the position that Jordan is looking at, in Jordan's head, he plays this move rook e1. He's thinking to himself, hey, man, I've got pawn and attack, right? Like, I get to push my pawn up the board. I get to go g5, g6. Life is good, and I'm material ahead. It's only when you really look at, like how this exchange sacrifice really, oops, sorry, how this exchange sacrifice really is incredibly good for white that you start to say,
Yeah.
hey, you know, this is just great.
Yeah, yeah.
Black is Black is definitely suffering. And after the game, it was actually funny because it was exactly here that Magnus he made a determination. He really literally said to himself, I've got to gamble. And he knew that the move bishop a3 was a gamble and go for the exchange, right?
Right.
Because if he felt at all that Jordan was going to accept the gamble, he would have gone something like this and played on from this position.
Yeah.
So bishop a3 was a premeditated gamble by
It definitely worked, though.
the world champion. Now, after this move a5, we immediately get a sense that, the extra pawn on the queen side is actually really hampered, right? It's
Yep.
going to take us, some efforts to prove that this majority can become a passer. Okay. Let's see. Any good questions?
Uh,
2252 are sub to the channel. That's good.
I think I think it's an interesting game to look at if you don't know the result of the game. You know,
Right.
like if you really are maybe seeing this for the first time. I mean, there's so many people here. I want to say there's got to be people who haven't seen the
Right.
game,
Sure.
and that's I mean it is the type of game you see the world champion with black, clearly good opening preparation from Jordan, and
Right.
then lots of opportunities basically just up a pawn. You can play this forever, until you get proven otherwise. It's just you always don't know how to view it. Is it really impressive by Jordan to get this position, or is it impressive how Magnus sometimes manages to like keep playing relevant defensive moves when it looks so bad? Because those are the hardest positions to play when you're slightly worse. It's just, oh man, it can be such a hopeless
Mm.
feeling sometimes. But he gives himself chances always.
Really, this is an extraordinary truth to share about Magnus is that we've come to appreciate him for his determination, his willpower in playing end games where he has a slight advantage, and he just keeps applying pressure. He keeps making the opponent squirm and coming up with moves. And if the opponent answers all the questions that Magnus poses, he gets a draw. That's like really a great reward. But Magnus is really phenomenal at winning those games that lesser grandmasters don't win. But what we don't
Lesser
often,
Grandmaster right over here, yes, sir.
yeah, yeah, right. What we don't often get a chance to behold is that Magnus, when he's behind the eight ball, when he's the one on the defensive and he's getting pressed, is he finds a way to stay in the game and hold the game and cling on. And well, his undefeated streak speaks volumes for itself, and that's what he does here. Now, in this moment, Jordan played the move Rook F2, and I think for a lot of us, we would play the same uh, because we would see that, okay, I mean, there's this rook is going to come down here one day, and wait a minute, we don't want to have to deal with that. But
Right.
rook f2 actually has a drawback, and that drawback was immediately seized upon by Magnus, bishop c1. And I really like this move a lot. Once the pawn is on a5, it's that pawn is doing a great job at corralling the pawns on a2 and b3. The pawns on a2 and b3 are really limited. The bishop on a3 is kind of excessive, right? I mean, you don't really absolutely need the bishop on a3 anymore. Whereas now, this bishop is being redirected to much nicer inhabited squares on e3 or f4. Much like knights, bishops also love anchored squares where they're nicely protected.
Bishop
And
c1 is such a nice move for black. Really, really rough to like. You think you're focusing on rook c2, rook f2, no problems, cover everything, but
right.
man, having to deal with that bishop arriving on e3 or f4, and all of a sudden, I think Jordan realized it was at this moment.
Let's go back to that exchange sacrifice moment, making it clear that now, with that bishop coming to e3, Jordan realized that he wasn't going to be better. Actually, Jordan made a very intriguing decision. He saw that his advantage was slipping away, and he decided to just simply shut down the position. That he's not trying to win anymore, but he doesn't want to make a mockery of his game and make things worse. In other words, he doesn't want to see the bishop ending up on the e3 square, and that he could be the one under pressure. So I thought that this was a really mature judgment call that he makes by giving up his pawn so he can play this move knight c4. Now, the move knight c4 comes, of course, with a double threat. You want to fork the rook and bishop, but you're also, hey, excuse me, the bishop is no longer protected because of knight c4. Bishop f4, knight e5, and immediately just, eliminating one of Black's bishops, and the game proceeded to become a draw.
Yeah, and there's not much you can do.
Now remember, this bishop is defending this rook, so you're threatening to take. Now you're threatening to bring the knight back into the play and eliminate this bishop, and that's why we see this repetition of moves. A great fight, and it just left the Dutch crowd thrilled that their man, this young champion, Jordan van Foreest, had not only held Magnus Carlsen, but really put the champ up against the wall. And for a lot of the organizers, I can tell, Jeroen Vandenberg, the event organizer, tournament director, really takes his job very, very seriously. And Jordan van Foreest was the lowest rated guy in the field, right?
Yeah.
You kind of put him in there because, he's the Dutch hope, right? But at the same time, you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, what happens if, he gets clobbered? Like, what did I do? Did I, short circuit his career? But Jordan played great, inspired chess, and I believe finished fourth or there's about with 7 points
which
out.
Which is an incredible result.
Exactly. And again, the lowest rated player in the field, and he produced, real quality game like this. So that was nice. That was nice.